Beloved, I want you to lean in close today because what I am about to share with you is not just a message, it is a word that carries the weight of heaven itself. Somewhere tonight, someone is lying awake, wondering how the bills will be paid, wondering if the breakthrough will ever come. Somewhere tonight, someone has looked at their bank account and felt shame instead of faith. But I have come to tell you that season is over. God spoke to my spirit and He said, tell my people to watch June 7th, 8th, and 9th. Not because God is bound by our calendars, He is not, but because God, in His mercy, gives us markers. He gives us signs so that our faith has something to hold on to while the unseen becomes seen. Just as He gave Noah a day, just as He gave Joseph a season, He is giving you these 3 days as a prophetic window, a window of elevation, a window of wealth, a window of divine turnaround. I know some of you have been taught to doubt. The world has trained you to believe that hope is foolish, that faith is naive. But I say to you today, don't doubt it. Don't let logic strangle the promise before it has a chance to be born. The same God who spoke the universe into existence with a word is speaking elevation over your life right now. So open your heart, open your hands, because wealth is coming. God is about to elevate you, and all heaven is asking you just one thing. Will you believe it? Beloved, let us begin here because this is the foundation upon which everything else in your breakthrough will stand. God speaks through divine timing, and He does not consult the calendar hanging on your kitchen wall. He does not ask permission from the clock on your phone. When God moves, He moves according to His own appointed seasons, seasons that were established before the foundations of the earth were laid, and He simply invites us into them. I remember in my own ministry in the early years when our church was so small and so poor that we had nothing but a tent and a handful of chairs, God spoke to me about timing that made no sense to my natural mind. I did not understand why breakthrough would come when it came. I only knew that when God gives you a window, your responsibility is not to analyze it. Your responsibility is to position yourself inside of it. Noah did not understand fully why the rain would come on that particular day, but he built the ark anyway. Joseph did not understand why 13 years would pass in a pit and in a prison before the palace, but the appointed day still came exactly when heaven had ordained it. This is what I want you to understand about June 7th, 8th, and 9th. These are not superstitious dates. These are not numbers pulled from thin air. These are prophetic markers given so that your faith has an anchor point, so that instead of vaguely hoping for someday, you can stand on something specific and say, God, I am watching, I am expecting, I am positioned. Divine timing works this way throughout the scriptures. God gave Abraham a season for Isaac to be born. He gave the Israelites a specific night for the Passover. He gave the disciples an appointed day for Pentecost. God has always operated by set times, and those set times often looked like ordinary days on an ordinary calendar until heaven broke into them. Now, here is what the enemy does not want you to understand. Human timing is built on what is visible. Your paycheck, your bank statement, your current job, your current health report. But divine timing is built on what God has already decreed in eternity, and it does not require your natural circumstances to make sense first. This is why so many people miss their breakthrough. They are waiting for their circumstances to shift before they believe, when in truth, God's timing shifts the circumstances after the faith is already in place. I want you to see yourself not as someone waiting on luck, not as someone waiting on chance, but as someone who has been given an appointment with the living God. When a king sets an appointment for you, you do not sit at home wondering if it is real. You prepare, you dress yourself, you show up expecting the doors to open. This is what I am asking you to do with these 3 days. Prepare your heart, set your expectation, show up in faith, because heaven has already marked the calendar, even if your natural eyes cannot yet see the evidence. Some of you have been hurt by delay in the past, and delay has convinced you that God forgot you, that God is slow, that God does not see your struggle. But delay is not denial. A woman who is 9 months pregnant does not believe the baby will never come simply because it has not arrived on the exact day she guessed. She adjusts her expectation to the timing of the one who knows best, and she prepares the nursery anyway. This is the posture I'm asking you to take. Prepare your nursery of faith. Get your heart ready to receive, because the God who set the stars in their courses, the God who commands the sun and the moon to rise on schedule, is the same God who has marked June 7th, 8th, and 9th as days of visitation over your life. Beloved, I want to speak to you now about something that quietly destroys more miracles than poverty ever could, more than sickness ever could, more than any circumstance you are facing, and that is doubt. Doubt is a thief. And unlike a thief who breaks down your door in the night, doubt sneaks in through the window of your own mind, wearing the disguise of being realistic. It does not announce itself as unbelief. It whispers to you that it is simply wisdom, simply caution, simply common sense. But I tell you today, doubt has robbed more people of their breakthrough than any external enemy ever has. Think about the children of Israel standing at the edge of the promised land. God had already given them the land. It was already decreed, already settled in heaven. But 10 of the 12 spies came back and said, "We are like grasshoppers in our own sight." That single sentence, born out of doubt, delayed an entire generation for 40 years. It was not God who delayed them. It was their own doubt that built a wall between them and what was already theirs. I want you to hear this clearly. The delay was never on God's side. The promise was already released. The doubt was what kept them wandering in circles around a blessing that had their name on it. This is exactly what happens when we allow doubt to negotiate with the promises of God. Doubt says, but look at your bank account. Doubt says, but look at how things have always been. Doubt says, but what if it doesn't happen this time? And you feel foolish for believing? And beloved, that fear of feeling foolish has kept more people in poverty, in sickness, in stagnation than any actual lack of resources ever could. Doubt convinces you to protect your heart by lowering your expectation, but in doing so, it robs you of the very posture that positions you to receive. I have seen this in my own life and ministry. When we believed God for our first sanctuary, there were voices, even within the church, that said it could not be done, that the vision was too large, that a poor pastor with a tent congregation had no business believing for something so great. Those voices were doubt speaking through well-meaning people. But I made a decision a long time ago that I would rather be called foolish for believing too much than be called wise for believing too little. Doubt always sounds intelligent. Doubt always sounds cautious. But doubt has never once built a church, healed a body, or lifted a family out of poverty. Only faith does that. I want you to examine your own heart today. Is there a place where doubt has quietly taken residence, dressed up as realism? Is there a place where you have already decided deep down that June 7th, 8th, and 9th probably will not change anything for you? That is the thief at work. That is the very mechanism that stole the promised land from an entire generation who were only steps away from it. They did not lack the promise. They lacked the courage to walk into it without doubting. Understand this, doubt does not simply delay your blessing. It can cause you to wander in a wilderness of your own making while the very thing you are praying for sits untouched, waiting for someone brave enough to receive it. The 2 spies who believed, Joshua and Caleb, were the only 2 of that entire generation who walked into the land God had promised. Same promise, same generation, same 40 years of wandering around them, but only the ones who refused to doubt actually inherited what was already theirs. Beloved, I want you to understand something profound about the nature of God's elevation. It almost always arrives before the natural mind can construct an explanation for it. This is not a coincidence. This is the very signature of God's power. Paul wrote that God's ability works exceedingly, abundantly, above all that we could ask or think. And notice, above what we could think. That means elevation, by its very design, will outrun your logic. It will arrive before your circumstances have lined up in a way that makes sense to your neighbors, your bank, or even your own reasoning mind. Consider Joseph once more, because his life is a living parable of this truth. One day he was in a prison cell, forgotten by the cupbearer who promised to remember him. The next day, seemingly without transition, he was standing before Pharaoh, and by the time the sun set, he was second in command over all of Egypt. There was no gradual, explainable staircase that the natural eye could trace. There was a pit, there was a prison, and then suddenly there was a palace. The world could not explain it because it was never designed to be explained by the world. It was designed to be recognized as the hand of God. This is what I mean when I say elevation always comes before the world can explain it. If your promotion, your breakthrough, your financial turnaround could be fully explained by your resume, by your effort, by your natural connections, then men would take the credit and God would receive none of the glory. But God, in His wisdom, often positions your elevation to happen in a manner that leaves people scratching their heads, asking, how did this happen? How did they come from where they were to where they are now? And the only honest answer left standing is the hand of God was upon them. I remember when our ministry grew from a handful of people meeting under difficult, humble conditions into one of the largest congregations in the world. There was no natural business model, no marketing strategy, no wealthy sponsor behind us that could account for that growth in purely human terms. People came from other nations trying to study our method, trying to find the organizational secret, and they left frustrated because the true secret was not a method at all. It was the manifest presence and elevation of God upon a people who dared to believe Him beyond what made sense. This is why I say to you, do not wait for your circumstances to make sense before you accept that your elevation is coming. Do not tell yourself, once I see the first sign, once I see one piece of evidence, then I will believe the rest will follow logically. God does not usually work that way. He often moves suddenly, decisively, and completely out of step with the natural progression the world expects. One moment you are overlooked, and without a long trail of breadcrumbs leading there, the next moment you are elevated in a way that silences every person who once doubted you. This is also why the enemy tries so hard to convince you that elevation must be slow, must be earned inch by inch, must be explainable by human effort alone. Because if he can keep you thinking in only natural terms, you will miss the suddenly of God when it arrives. But I remind you of the disciples in the upper room. One moment they were ordinary men hiding behind locked doors, uncertain and afraid, and the next moment tongues of fire rested upon them, and they were transformed into men who shook nations. There was no natural explanation for that transition either. There was only the suddenly of God. So when June 7th, 8th, and 9th arrive, do not be surprised if the elevation God brings does not fit neatly into the box of what you expected or planned. Do not be surprised if it comes through a door you never considered, from a source you never anticipated, in a timing that defies every spreadsheet and every 5-year plan you have made for yourself. Beloved, we have come now to the most personal part of this message, because everything I have shared with you up to this point, the divine timing, the danger of doubt, the sudden nature of elevation, all of it converges on one single unavoidable truth. What you receive during these 3 days will be determined not by what God is willing to do, but by what you are willing to believe. God has already released the wealth. God has already decreed the elevation. But release from heaven and reception on earth are two different things, and the bridge between them is always faith. I want you to consider the woman with the issue of blood. Jesus was already flowing with healing virtue as he walked through that crowd. That power was not reserved specifically for her. It was present, available, surrounding everyone who touched him accidentally in that crush of people. But only one woman received it, and Jesus himself told her why. Your faith has made you whole. Not his power alone. His power was present for everyone in that crowd, but her faith reached out and pulled what was already available into her own life. The same virtue that healed her passed by dozens of others who touched him only casually, without expectation, without desperate reaching faith, and they received nothing. This is exactly the principle at work in these 3 days. The wealth is already coming. I do not say this as speculation. I say it as something declared over you by the Spirit of God. The elevation is already in motion. But whether you personally step into it is going to be determined entirely by the posture of your faith during this window. Some of you will treat June 7th, 8th, and 9th as ordinary days, and for you they may pass as ordinary days. But some of you will treat these 3 days as a divine appointment, and for you everything will change because you positioned your faith to receive what your doubt would have otherwise pushed away. I think of the 4 lepers in the book of Kings sitting outside the gate of a starving city, having decided among themselves, why sit we here until we die? They made a decision to move toward the enemy's camp, even though logically they had no reason to expect anything but death. But their decision to move, their decision to act on the smallest flicker of faith, led them to a camp that God had already caused the enemy to abandon, full of silver, gold, and provision. The blessing was already there before they ever took a single step. It was not their effort that created the wealth. The wealth was already positioned by God. But it was their movement, their faith in motion, that determined whether they personally would partake in it or die outside the gate, wondering what might have been. This is your moment to ask yourself honestly, will you sit outside the gate or will you rise and move toward what God has already prepared? Faith is not a passive feeling you wait to arrive. Faith is a decision you make in the middle of uncertainty, a decision to declare what heaven has already declared, even while your natural eyes see no proof yet. During these 3 days, I want you to pray as though you already possess it. I want you to thank God as though the wealth has already touched your hands. I want you to walk differently, speak differently, expect differently, because the receiving posture of faith is what transforms an available blessing into a possessed blessing. Understand this. 2 people can stand in the exact same service, hear the exact same word, sit under the exact same anointing, and one will walk away transformed while the other walks away unchanged, not because God was partial, but because faith was unequal. The wealth God has released for June 7th, 8th, and 9th is sufficient for every person in this place, but it will only become personal, tangible, and real in the life of the one who dares to believe it belongs to them and reaches out to take hold of it as though their very life depended on it. Beloved, as we come to the close of this message, I want you to carry one thing with you above everything else. God is not a man that he should lie, and what he has spoken over June 7th, 8th, and 9th is already settled in heaven. You do not need to strive to make it happen. You do not need to manufacture it through your own strength. Your only assignment is to believe, to position yourself, and to refuse the voice of doubt when it comes knocking at the door of your mind. I have watched heaven move in ways that defied every explanation, every calendar, every human expectation. And I tell you today, what God did in the past, he is still doing now. He is still the God of sudden elevation. He is still the God who turns pits into palaces and prison cells into promotions. Do not let this word simply pass through your ears. Let it take root in your spirit and produce a harvest in your life. As you go from here, hold fast to this expectation. Watch these 3 days with open hands and an open heart. And if this message has stirred faith in you, if you sense that God is speaking directly to your situation, do not keep it to yourself. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss a word that heaven sends through this ministry. Leave a comment below and tell me, are you believing God for your wealth, for your elevation in these 3 days? Share this message with someone who needs to hear that their breakthrough is coming. God bless you, and I will see you in the elevation.